even though in the US we think of ourselves as very progressive in a lot of ways, marriage is something that is done by almost everyone. To not marry is really quite shocking. Whereas I think in France it's not quite the same. Is that right? The Engagements is a novel about marriage, and it spans the course of the last century, following 4 very different marriages. And unlike Commencement and Main, which are stories about a group of individuals who are connected, in this book the marriages are very separate, the lives are extremely different from one another. And it's probably the first of my novels that's the farthest from my own life experience. Also, this idea of the diamond engagement ring, in the US it really took hold, and it's something that everyone does. Even if you have very little money, you'll still wear a diamond engagement ring. It will just be a very tiny, tiny diamond. So I don't get the impression that in other countries it's quite the same. In some countries it is, but not necessarily in France. At the end of the day, I think that every marriage is such a unique thing unto itself, whether it's in France, the US, or wherever. So I don't think you can necessarily say, do French women or American women think of marriage differently? It's just every person sees it so differently, which is what makes it a fascinating topic for a novel. Because I have a background in journalism, whenever I'm afraid of getting something wrong in fiction, I usually just report out the story. So to write the character of Delphine, I came to Paris and sort of walked the streets with a guide, the streets where she would live, and constructed her life in that way. But also because she moves to New York at a very particular time, 2003, the start of the Iraq War, I interviewed many, many women, Parisian women who moved to New York, a few of them right at that time, to ask them what their impressions were, what did they think of Americans when they first got there, how did they think that New York compared to Paris and all of this. So Delphine's story is really a combination of all of their stories combined. You know, I watched the first season of Mad Men, and then I sort of trailed off and stopped watching it, with nothing to do with the book, but I just stopped watching it. And then once I started writing the character of Frances Garrity, I purposely didn't watch Mad Men again because I didn't want it to influence how I saw her. There is sort of a Mad Men quality to her world, but I always say to people she's sort of Peggy Olson 20 years before there was Peggy Olson, because Frances was writing in the 1940s, which was really unusual for a woman at that time. I just love to read a great novel, and I think that, you know, recently I've been rereading Middlemarch, which is sort of the ultimate novel about marriage, and I think that Middlemarch, it holds up. It's still exactly the kind of novel it was when it was first published. It's devourable, so I love that novel. My favorite, more contemporary novel is 1,000 Acres by Jane Smiley. And usually the stories that I love, as in both of these cases, are just about you know, human beings interacting within their family circles, within their marriages, and kind of more, I guess you would say, domestic dramas. This book is really about how marriage is viewed in each particular decade, whether it's you know, same-sex marriage or interracial marriage being illegal in the early 1970s in the US, and now it's quite common. Divorce being something that was so scandalous only a few decades ago and is now quite commonplace. So it's really about all of these societal changes in the institution of marriage and then how those play out in individual people's lives.